Hello, everyone, and good morning and good afternoon, whatever wherever you are. Okay, so today's topic is creating SSL certificate with Zeems, and we won't be using any scripting or anything like that. And we'll show you how to create SSL certificate. So let's get started. You hang on a minute. Let me see if. Can everybody hear me? If you guys can hear me, can you please somebody chat? You can, yeah. So yep, it's good to go. Okay. All right, so let's get started. So the agenda today is we're going to talk about some background theory about SSL certificate. Then we're going to talk a few words about how Let's Encrypt works. Then I'm going to give you a demo using the web interface of Zeems, and we're going to talk about some upcoming features, and finally we're going to have QA. All right, so okay, so what is an SSL certificate? I'm sure a lot of people have used it. There are a few things that you have to understand. This way you'll know what exactly happens in the background. So it's just a matter of public-private key, right? Whenever two computers need to talk, the one person uses the private key to encrypt, the other person uses the sender's public key to decrypt. The only problem is that the public key is not trusted. How does the receiving end knows that the public key came from, the correct source? And because of that, we need to introduce the certificate authority. And all certificate authorities do is sign your public key. And once the public key is signed by a trusted authority, then the receiving end knows that, yes, the message did come from the right source. The problem is that these certificate authorities, they charge, an yearly fee, which could be anywhere from $99 to, depending on how many years you get your certificate. The other problem is that it's not very easy to create these certificates. We have published quite a few articles on our website that show you the instructions on how to do it, but we get support calls almost every week regarding this problem. For one reason or the other, people are not able to create these certificates. One other very important thing to keep in mind is that a certificate by itself is of no value. A lot of times people tell us, hey, you know what, I'm using my certificate on an Apache server and I want to use it in Zeems. And we tell them that certificate by itself is of no value. You have to have your private key. Now, often people lose the private key. And if the private key is not there, there's nothing you can do with the certificate. So the private key goes along with the certificate. Okay? And lastly, it's tied to a domain name. Now, you can get a wildcard domain name, in which case you can put like either www@yourcompany.com or mail.yourcompany.com and things like that. Or you can create a single domain certificate. And again, if you get a wildcard, then the certificate authority charges you more, even though there is no additional cost on their end. But I guess you are getting more value, so they charge you more. All right, so let's talk about Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is an organization. It's free, it's open, and the best part is that it's automated. Once you create a script or a program that can create certificates, then there's usually no human involvement. And that's the best part. The second, in my opinion, the best part is free. You don't have to pay anything. Right, and lately it has been trusted by almost every browser. It's almost every email server, the newer ones, they trust this certificate, and a lot of companies are behind it. So it's a pretty good solution. All right, and now so let's talk about some of the steps that Zeems is going to take in the background so that you understand what's going on, just in case if something goes wrong and you need to debug something or troubleshoot something. So the first thing that has to happen is that there has to be a creation of public-private key. Once the public-private key has been created, there has to be a CSR, which is a certificate signing request. So Zeems is going to send this CSR to Let's Encrypt, and then Let's Encrypt needs to verify it. So let's assume that you are trying to create a certificate for mail.xyz.com. Let's Encrypt is going to validate if that domain name does belong to you. And there are multiple ways of doing that. The two most common ways are HTTP, meaning they require that you have an HTTP server on that domain so that they can verify, they're going to send a file, and then they're going to read the same file from your HTTP server to confirm that this is your server. The second thing they can do is DNS, and we're going to talk about that. Now, once the verification step is done, they're going to issue the certificate. Now, there are different formats of an SSL certificate. There's a PEM format, there's a PKCS format, and there are a couple others. The most common is PEM, and PEM is used in Apache server. Zeems does not use PEM. So because of that, there's an extra step, and that step is to convert the PEM into PKCS 12. So Zeems is going to do that also in the background. And finally, renewal. The certificates issued by Let's Encrypt only last for 90 days. So, and since they only are good for 90 days, you have to renew it every 3 months or so. Okay. Now, another very important thing that you have to keep in mind is a rate limit. Since this is a free service, and like any free service, it's open to misuse. And just so that people don't start misusing the service, they have strict restrictions on how many requests you can send. There's a web URL here, http://letsencrypt.org docs/rate limits. I strongly recommend that you guys go and check all the details, but I've put a couple of bullets what they say. Basically, you can only have about 50 per week for registered domains, not subdomains. This is the registered domain. So if you have yourcompany.com and you create certificates for mail.yourcompany.com, www.mailcompany.com, all those are considered registered domains, right? So you have 50 for those. You can have up to 5 per week for duplicates. So if there's a mail.xyz.com, you can only have 5 requests per week. And then failed validation. I'm going to talk about validation. So the bottom line is that there are restrictions. And because there are restrictions, they also provide you a way to test your certificate before actually submitting the real request. And that testing part is called staging. And I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So let's talk about validation, okay? Before Let's Encrypt is going to issue a certificate, they want to confirm that the domain that you are applying the certificate for belongs to you. And the 2 ways that they can confirm, first is an HTTP request. This is not an HTTPS. It's an HTTP request, and it has to be on port 80. They don't allow any other port but port 80. So there has to be a web server on your end. During the process, Let's Encrypt is going to send a file, and then they're going to try reading that file from your HTTP server. And if the file is read, then they think, oh, you know what, the certificate, the domain name is good, and they issue a certificate. The second method is a DNS. So they give you a text record. You simply enter that text record in your DNS server, and then they query the DNS, and that means that everything is good. Okay. All right. So now let's do a demo. One thing that I want to mention is that the URLs that you see here will be live. So while I'm doing the demo, you will be able to go to these URLs and do the testing. Right now, they probably are not working because I haven't done anything yet. Okay. So I'm going to move this. If anybody wants to copy that URL, they can do it. All right, so first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna log in as admin, and I'm gonna go to my server configuration and change my SSL port to 4443. Now, by the way, this is a new version of Zines, which was made public today. So, once the demo is over, you can actually go in and fetch the new version, and you will be able to use this. One other thing that we have added in this version is the second web server port, which wasn't there earlier. And because of this Let's Encrypting on port 80, we had to add another port, just in case if you were using 5272 for your regular stuff, you can add port 80 here, okay? But for the time being, I'm not gonna add port 80, I'm only going to add 443. And then when I save it, now every time I change my SSL port, I have to restart, okay? So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna restart my Zeems. Now, once Zeems has been restarted, you will be able to go to the bottom URL. The only problem is that it's not gonna be trusted, right? It's using a self-signed certificate and it's not trusted, so you will get a warning message in your browser. All right, I'm just gonna click home. Hopefully it's up by now, and it is. Okay, so now if you go at this location, it should, let me see if I can just go there. Yep, but I get a warning message that the certificate is not trusted, right? So let's go back. Now, there is a new link here that says Manage SSL Certificate. So far, all I did was I enabled 443. Whenever I enable 443, it's going to get a self-signed certificate so that you don't have to worry about certificate. But of course, this is self-signed, right? So this is of very little value when you're using an email server. We added this option here in the new one, and you basically just click here to manage your SSL certificates. You know what? Hang on a minute. Just give me one moment. I have to reset my certificates because right now, actually, let me reset this because I was testing earlier and I did not reset this. Just give me one moment. All right, let's try that one more time. So I'm going to click this Manage Certificates. And why did it do that? Okay, anyway, don't worry about it. I'm just going to click here to renew my certificate, okay? If you do it on your end, you will come to this screen directly. You won't go to that earlier screen, which was basically a status screen. All right, anyway, so here's what we're doing. This is the host name of your Zeem server. Of course, on your end, it's going to be a different host name. So you will either you manually type it in, or Zeems is going to try to figure it out what the host name is. Make sure that before you issue a final certificate, you click this button because this is the testing. And remember in the couple of slides ago, I spoke about the rate limit. You don't want to issue a live certificate until you've tested all this. Okay. Now, up here, there are two different methods or three different methods. You can select how you want the challenge response to occur. Because remember, Let's Encrypt will check to see if you are the owner of this domain name, right? So first, I'm going to use the DNS method. The problem with DNS method is that renewals are not automatic because there's no way, at least right now, to automatically update a DNS server. So let's assume that you have your DNS server with GoDaddy. Right now, there's no way for Zeems to update an entry in GoDaddy's DNS server. And because of that, renewals are not automatic. So if you decide to use this method, you're going to have to manually renew the certificates after like 80 days or so. Okay. All right. So first, I'm going to show you the DNS method, and then we're going to do the HTTP method. Okay? So all you got to do is select DNS, and then you click Submit. And on the next page, you're going to see the Let's Encrypt terms of use. Make sure that you click here to read their terms. And then once you're done, you click Proceed. Now, when you click Proceed on the following screen, you're going to see the values that should go in your DNS server. This is the host name that should go in the DNS server. This is the value for that. Now, one common mistake that people make is that when entering the text value in the DNS server, they put the entire host name. You should only put this part of the host name, okay? Because the trailing part is understood. So don't put the .cinemetrics.com, but simply put up until here, okay? And then of course this is a text record. Now after you put the text record, you should run this command from any tool. So let me open, I'm gonna bring this here, right? And if I paste this command, it should return. Now, we already have a record in the DNS server, so the values don't match, but you get the point. So before clicking the button, the Proceed button, make sure that you are able to do a NS lookup, and the value that you see here matches with this, okay? Because that means your DNS has been updated. One other thing that I recommend you do is use the smallest value for time to live. Because if this time to live, usually it's like, sometimes it could be days, and DNS server cached the value. So select the smallest value supported by your DNS server. In GoDaddy, the smallest value you can put is about 30 minutes. So every DNS server will cache that value for 30 minutes. You want to use the smallest value, okay? Now, I'm not going to hit Proceed because I don't want to use the DNS method. I'm going to show you the HTTP method, okay? So I'm going to go back. And again, I'm going to select my test because this is, again, a test certificate. Now, there are two different options for HTTP. The first one is by default, which is Zeems. But let's say if I select Other, what this means is that if I have another server, maybe an Apache server or an IIS server on the same computer, which is listening on port 80, in that case, I would be putting, so let's say if I have an IIS server, I will be putting, let's say this in my root path, because this is the root of my IIS server. And when the challenge file comes back from Let's Encrypt, Zeems is going to put the files off of that location, and when Let's Encrypt tries to pull the files, it'll be able to find it. Okay. For this demo, I'm going to use Zeems. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to use Zeems. Now, the minute I switch to Zeems, it tells me that, hey, Zeems is not listening on port 80. Okay, so I have to configure it on port 80. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select port 80. Now, besides specifying port 80 at this location, I also have to make sure that my firewalls are set up, right? So I'm going to, again, restart. So once this is over, I'll be able to connect on port 80. But just for this demo, I have not opened my firewall. I just want you to see what happens when the firewall is not open. All right, I don't want to wait for 10 seconds. I'm just going to click home here. All right, so I'm back. Now, if I do this on, actually, I'm going to do localhost, right? Just localhost on port 80. And it's listening on port 80. But I'm still not able to connect from outside because I haven't opened the firewall yet. So I want you to see what happens when the firewall is closed, okay? Again, I'm going to do my testing, and I'm going to select. So now it says, hey, Zeems is listening on port 80. And because it does not know if the firewall is open or not, it's telling you, hey, go here, and you'll be able to connect, okay? So when I'm going to hit submit, Zeems is going to actually check if your firewall is open or not. So I'm going to click submit, and then I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm going to get an error message that says, hey, something is wrong. Port 80 is not open from outside. Takes a little longer to do that test, but eventually you'll get that. Okay, so it says, hey, something is wrong, right? That the firewall is not open. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to configure my firewall. And once my firewall is open, I'll be able to do the same test again. I'm just changing the configuration on my firewall right now, and it'll be done in a minute. Okay, so now it should be fine. So now I'm going to basically do the same thing again. I'm just testing, okay, because I don't want the real test to go all the way to Let's Encrypt because of that rate limit I spoke earlier. So that's it. I click submit again. Now I didn't get that warning message, and instead I get my terms of service, and then all I do is click proceed. So now it is going to do two things. It's sending the CSR to Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is going to send a file which it's going to look for on port 80, and then eventually when the certificate comes back, it's going to convert that into PKCS 12. All right, I see this warning message here because the certificate was created using a testing environment. And because of that, it's not trusted, okay? Of course, I changed the certificate, so it's telling me to, hey, restart Zeems one more time. Another thing it does, up here, it gives you some important information where the files are stored. Because Zeems is going to create all the, your private key and things like that, and it tells you where these things are stored. So let me show you what those files are. Let me try to open my Windows File Manager. So here on my end, it's running in my temp folder. Okay, so in here, there's this new folder called Let's Encrypt, and all these files are here. This is my private key, this is my account key, and things like that, okay? And this tells you what these files are, and we strongly recommend that you back these files up. All right, so I'm gonna start Zeems, and once it's started, you should be able to, on your end, put HTTPS mac1.cinemetrics.com, and the port is 4443, okay? But it won't be trusted because I still used, so still it's up, Zeems is up, but it's not trusted still because I use the test certificate. So if I go back here, now see, since the certificate has been issued, when I click on this manage existing, I see this screen, okay? And I'm gonna click here to override these settings and recreate the certificate. All right, so now let's create a live certificate, okay? So I'm not gonna click this test, and I'm gonna leave this on HTTP using Zeems, and I'm gonna create a live certificate. So that's it. I'm gonna click proceed. And that's it. I don't see the warning message here, and after I restart, you will be able to connect on that HTTP port, HTTPS port, without the warning message, okay? Okay, so it's up. Now, if I refresh this, voila, it connects. If you click on this lock here, it tells you that it's been verified by Let's Encrypt. If I click on the lock and I go to more details, I'm gonna have to move this here. Okay, so you can see that it's a valid certificate. It expires on July 9th, and that's it. And if you click here, it's gonna tell you that it's been verified by Let's Encrypt, okay? All right, so let me connect. I'm gonna have to connect from here. All right, so now when I click this certificate, this is the screen that I was also getting earlier because I didn't clear up my files on my computer. But anyway, so it tells you that your certificate is valid until July 9th. About 80 days before this expiration, Zeems is going to automatically send a renewal request to Let's Encrypt. Okay, that 80-day is configurable, but in our opinion, 80 days is pretty good number. So you shouldn't have to change that. So Zeems is going to automatically do it. Now, if you were using the DNS method, it'll send you an email and just as a reminder, hey, renew your certificate. And in that case, you're going to have to do it manually. But if you are using the HTTP method, it doesn't matter if you're using port 80 using Zeems or any other HTTP server. As long as the path is specified, it'll be able to put the files where Let's Encrypt will be able to look. And that's pretty much it. And now you have a valid certificate from Let's Encrypt. All right. Okay, now so some of the few new features. There are not that many new features besides this. I'm gonna open up the change log in Zeems. So the first is this Let's Encrypt, right? The second one is ability to listen on multiple HTTP ports. That's the one I showed you earlier. Ability to look inside a RAR file. So let me connect to this RAR file is, if you get an attachment using RAR, you can look inside those. Okay. And the last one is the ability to analyze messages. Let me just connect to my main Zeems and I'll show you how that works. Hold on, let me move a window here. Hang on. Okay, so here's another window. This is our production Zeems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a report, and I'm going to see if anybody sent me a RAR file, okay? Well, nobody did. Let me change the... Okay, there we go. Somebody sent a RAR file, okay? So I can go here and, oh, you know what? It's too old. I can't. No, it's too big. Okay. But basically what you can do is the attachments, if there are any RAR files, you will be able to, let me not do RAR because nobody sent us a RAR file recently. Let me search for a PDF. Okay, there we go. Maybe we can open this one. So, when you go and you click on this view as text, you will be able to see view as text for RAR files. Okay, that's what that means. And then the second thing you can do is this analyze button. If you click this analyze, well, this is an outbound email, so you cannot analyze. But let me analyze some of the junk messages that we get. So here we go. Let's look at this guy. You can analyze incoming messages, and it'll tell you if a lot of things were okay for the incoming message. Okay, and that is pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions? Use your chat window to type your questions. Okay. Oh, so okay. Does port 80 stay open after the renewal? Well, it's up to you, but we would recommend that you leave port 80 open because every, let's say, 80 days, the renewal has to happen, and if you have a way of, closing port 80 right after renewal, fine, no problem. But I don't know how you're gonna, because if you forget to open port 80 when it's time to renew, Let's Encrypt won't be able to validate, and it won't issue you a certificate. So as long as you can remember opening port 80 right at around renewal time, you're fine. So, but I recommend you can enable port 80, but there's one other setting in Zeems that you can check, which is this force HTTPS. So even if port 80 is open, you can force everybody to come on port 80. Your SSL port, okay? All right, there's another question. Does it have to be a separate port, or it can be same port? Does it have to be a separate port? I'm not sure. What do you mean by separate port? You have to listen on port 80. Port 80 can be used to, the regular Zeems configuration. By default, it uses this, but it doesn't have to use that, right? You can always set it up at port 80. So I'm not sure if I understand that question correctly. I think it's posted by Sean. Please let me know if I didn't answer that question correctly, okay? All right, the next question is, what happens to Let's Encrypt if you have force HTTPS set? Okay, that's a good question. So if you have force HTTPS set, it's not gonna do anything. You will still be able to renew on port 80. And the reason is that we have the force HTTPS only works on the dynamic part, not the static part. So you will still be able to use Let's Encrypt will still be able to fetch its files even if this guy is checked, okay? All right, can I leave IIS on port 80? Of course. Okay, so the question is, can I leave IIS on port 80 and Zeems on 443? Yes, absolutely. And if you decide to do that, right, if you decide to do that, you basically go here, and when you select this other, make sure that you put the path where your IIS is stored. IIS has something called a root folder, and whatever is in the root folder, it's gonna fetch the files. I believe if I look at so you know what? Hold on, let me show you something. Okay, this is my Zeems, right? Now I use Zeems for listen on port 80. If you go to this location, this is where all the files are. This well-known, this is the folder structure, this one right here. I'm gonna copy that. I'm gonna put it in Notepad so that it's easier to, okay, so this is the folder structure. Let me change the font size a little bit. This is the folder structure, okay, where it's going to look for that challenge file. Let's assume that the name of the challenge file is abc.txt, okay? So what happens is that Let's Encrypt is going to send a file. Zeems is going to put that file at this location, and when Let's Encrypt tries to fetch the file, it'll find it. Now, if you're using IIS, and in IIS, your root is www root, followed by, I don't know, whatever, XYZ. If you specify this as your root folder, as here, right? Zeems is gonna put the file at this location. Okay, so make sure that Zeems is able to create this folder structure, and it'll be able to write. As long as it's able to write that file, Let's Encrypt will be able to fetch the file, okay? All right, you just, okay, Bill Sanders says that I answered. Okay, good, thanks. All right, so this is for Zeems admin, SSL only? Oh, no. So the one question is this for the Zeems admin, not for mail? No, it's for both. So once you get the SSL configured here, you would go into your regular SMTP configuration and you enable Start TLS. You cannot enable Start TLS unless HTTPS is working. And once your HTTPS is working, the same certificate is used for mail. So it's going to use Start TLS. Okay. Any other questions? So this is for Okay. All right. No questions? Okay, if this forward to the exchange server, do I need to install cert on the exchange server? Yes. Actually, that's a good question. So the question is, can you use this certificate on an exchange server? Yes, you can. So let me show you what happens in the background. If I go, so this is again my Zeems, right? The installer of Zeems. I go to my Let's Encrypt folder. This is where my certificates are. Now, this file is the file that was sent to me by Let's Encrypt. This is in PEM format. Now, Exchange also use PKCS12. Exchange does not use PEM. So before you can use this in Exchange, you have to convert. But Zeems has already converted that file. But the converted version of this file is not in this folder. It is in the config folder. So if you go here, no, not this one, this one. It's called Let Inc. So if I go back at my SSL configuration, you see this is the PKCS 12 version of the file, which is right here on my Zeems. Now, if you were to copy this file to your Exchange server, yes, you can certainly use this file on Exchange. The only problem is renewal, right? Because I don't know how you're gonna, unless you can tell Exchange to use this file every 90 days, I'm not exactly sure how you're gonna do that. So if you're okay with the renewal part, then you can certainly use this certificate on your Exchange server. Okay, or Exchange server, or any server, doesn't have to be. If you're using an Apache server, then this is what you need. In Apache, you need actually two files. You need, this is your certificate, and this is your key. So this is your private key, and this is your certificate. The PFX file is basically kind of like a store. So a store has your private key as well as your certificate. Whereas in Apache, you have to tell, hey, this is my private key and this is my certificate. So you're going to need two files if you use Apache, but you only use one file if you use IIS. Okay, and by the way, this feature is available in the community edition of Zeems. So if you are just using the community edition, and if you want to use it just to create your SSL certificate, you can certainly do that. Any other questions? All right. Oh, there's one more question. The ability to filter mail by country is in place. Is there any chance there could be ability to filter ability to filter connections in the future? Okay, so the question is, the ability to filter by country is there. Is there any chance there could be ability to filter connections? Filter connections. I'm not sure if I understand that. What do you mean by filter connections in the future? Can you please rephrase your question? I think we need connections. I think he means connections to the Zeems HTTP server. Connections equals sending mail to my server. William, I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. Connection equals sending mail to my server. Are you saying that you want to filter by IP address? By country. Okay, so if you want to, rather than, so basically your question is, can you filter by country? You can, but in our opinion, that's probably not the best way, okay? And the reason why that's not the best way is because, 10 years ago, people used to send their junk messages by, buying network from some companies, right? These days, they don't do that. They don't bother sending their junk from a handful of IP addresses. What they try to do is they try to get email servers that are not configured correctly, and they could be anywhere in the world, and then they misuse those servers to send their junk. So filtering by country is probably not the best way to do it, but you can still do it. You can go and IP filter and country filter. Okay, a better approach is to do language filters. So if you go here in content filter and you go to language filters, you can select what languages you want to receive emails. So let's say if you get too many Chinese emails and you don't want Chinese, you basically go here and you say, okay, if the message is more than 20% Chinese, I want to assign a score of 100. So in my opinion, this is a better approach than using country filters, because emails will come from pretty much every country. Like I said, they usually don't come from the where the spammer is. They try to use all over the place. Okay, I have people in countries trying to guess email username and password to their junk through my server. Okay, so William asked this question. He said, "Hey, I have people. They're trying to figure out my user IDs and password." Okay. We actually did a webinar exactly on that topic, what to do. If you go to Google and search for Zeem's best practices, okay, there's a page that talks about this, and take a look at this, the very first one, okay? Read this, and basically what it's doing, it explains how people do that and what can you do in Zeem's. Just a quick thing that you can do is if you go to SMTP Server, this primary port, which is usually 25, I changed it to 2501 on my end. What you can do is uncheck this box, because you don't want SMTP authentication on port 25, okay? And that's gonna take care of probably 95% of your attacks. But I strongly recommend that you read this page and you take these steps, okay? All right, so Bill is saying, William, are you asking if you can block access to the Zeem server altogether by country? Oh, is that what you're asking, nor just the email? So William, were you asking, did you want to block access to the web interface from certain countries? See, I'm not sure if you can block it for certain countries, but one thing that you can do for your web interface is this access control. And in this access control, you can put who can connect. Like, for example, right now, the demo that I'm doing, I don't want, this is a public URL, right? I have restricted the admin access just to my local host and to my local LAN, because I don't want anybody to connect from outside. So that's something that you can do on your end, okay? Any other questions? Okay, access. Okay, good. All right, so if there are no more questions, we are recording this and we will be putting it on our website. If you want, you can go here and in the videos, or no, the webinar sections. These are our older webinars for some reason. Okay, so these are our older webinars. You can watch these, and then we're going to be adding this one shortly. After today, okay? One last chance to post any questions, and if not, we're gonna call this complete. Okay, all right, thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully you're gonna join us for other seminars in the future. Thanks, bye.